Officer Jake Turner stood by his patrol car, looking down at his partner, Rex. The loyal German shepherd sat beside him, his ears perked up, his eyes sharp. Rex had been Jake's K-9 partner for 7 years. They had chased criminals together, saved lives, and protected the city. But tonight was different. Tonight was Rex's last mission. "Ready, buddy?" Jake asked, patting Rex's head. Rex wagged his tail and let out a small bark, as if to say, "Always." Jake sighed. He didn't want to think about Rex retiring. The thought of working without him felt strange, almost wrong. But Rex was getting older. He had given his best years to the force. Soon, he would be going to a loving home, where he could finally rest. The radio in Jake's car crackled. "All units, we have a robbery in progress at the corner of 10th and Maple. Armed suspect. Proceed with caution." Jake's heart raced. An armed suspect was dangerous. But he and Rex had handled tough situations before. He grabbed his radio and responded, "Unit 14 on the way." He opened the car door. "Let's go, Rex." Rex jumped in, alert and ready. Jake turned on the siren, speeding toward the scene. The streets were quiet, but the flashing red and blue lights reflected off the buildings as they raced through the city. When they arrived, the small convenience store's glass door was shattered. Inside, the cashier looked terrified. A man in a black hoodie was pointing a gun at him. Another suspect stood by the shelves, stuffing a bag with money and goods. Jake's grip on his gun tightened. He couldn't rush in blindly. He needed a plan. He turned to Rex. "We have to be smart, boy. Stay low." Rex's body tensed, his instincts kicking in. Jake took a deep breath and stepped out of the car. "Police, drop the weapon," he shouted. The man with the gun spun around, his eyes wide. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Then suddenly, the suspect bolted, running out the back door. Jake cursed under his breath. "Rex, go." Rex sprinted after him, his powerful legs carrying him fast. Jake followed, his own heart pounding. They ran through the dark alley, the sound of footsteps echoing between the buildings. The suspect turned a corner, and Jake heard the sound of a fence rattling. He was trying to climb over. But Rex was faster. With one powerful leap, Rex grabbed the man's pant leg, pulling him down before he could escape. The suspect yelped in fear, dropping his gun. Jake rushed forward, kicking the gun away before the man could reach for it. "You're under arrest," he said, grabbing the suspect's hands and cuffing him. The second suspect, who had stayed inside the store, was quickly caught by backup officers. The situation was under control. Jake looked down at Rex, who stood proudly by his side, his tail wagging. He knelt down and scratched behind his ears. "Good job, partner," he said softly. Rex licked Jake's hand, as if to say, "I've got your back always." Jake smiled, but deep inside, he felt a heaviness in his heart. This was Rex's last mission. Soon, he wouldn't be by Jake's side anymore. But tonight, they were still together. And as long as they had one more night on duty, Jake was going to cherish every second of it. After the arrest was made, Jake stood up and looked at the two suspects being led away by the other officers. The whole scene had been fast, intense, and now it was over. But as Jake looked down at Rex, something didn't feel right. Rex was panting heavily, his tongue hanging out, but his eyes were still alert. Despite his age, he was as sharp as ever. The vet had told Jake just last week that Rex was getting closer to his retirement, but right now, Rex didn't look like a dog who was ready to slow down. "We're not done yet, buddy," Jake said, rubbing Rex's head. Rex wagged his tail in response. Just as Jake was about to walk back to the car, the radio crackled again. This time, it wasn't just a robbery. It was worse. "Attention all units. A bank robbery in progress at Maple and 5th. Armed suspects. Shots fired. We need immediate backup." Jake's stomach dropped. A bank robbery. with shots fired. That was serious. He looked down at Rex, who was already moving toward the car, ready to go. The dog knew it was time to work. Jake hesitated for a second. He wanted to take a moment to think. Rex's retirement was just days away, and Jake didn't want to risk losing him. But Jake knew they didn't have time to waste. "Let's go, Rex. We've got work to do." They jumped into the car, and Jake turned the siren back on, speeding down the road. The city felt like a blur as they rushed toward the bank. The lights of nearby cars blinked in and out as Jake maneuvered through the streets. Rex sat beside him, his head turned toward the window, ears alert, waiting for what came next. As they arrived at the scene, Jake saw the chaos. Several police cars were parked outside the bank, their lights flashing. People were running down the street, looking scared. There was a crowd gathered behind the barricades, their faces full of worry and fear. Jake grabbed his radio and spoke calmly but quickly. "Unit 14 reporting in. I'm on the scene. What's the situation?" "Officer Turner," came the voice from the other end. "We've got 3 suspects inside. They're armed and dangerous. We have the area surrounded. But we need help. We don't know if any hostages are inside yet." Jake's heart raced. He glanced over at Rex, who was already out of the car, tail wagging, ready to go. Rex could sense the seriousness of the situation. He didn't hesitate for a moment. "Stay close," Jake told him as they approached the front door of the bank. The air felt tense, thick with uncertainty. Jake's hand gripped his gun, but he knew better than to rush in without a plan. They had to be smart. They had to be careful. The officers were waiting for the SWAT team, but Jake knew the longer they waited, the more dangerous the situation became. He made a decision. He couldn't sit around and wait for backup. Rex had saved lives before, and Jake had a feeling they could do it again. "Rex, we move on 3, Jake whispered. Rex, ever the loyal partner, barked softly and nodded as if he understood the plan. Jake and Rex moved closer to the door. Through the glass, Jake could see one of the suspects pacing inside. The man was holding a gun, shouting at someone inside the bank. Jake signaled to the officers behind him to get ready. With one last glance at Rex, Jake stepped forward. 1, 2, 3. He kicked the door open, and Rex darted inside, barking loudly. The suspect turned, surprised. But Rex didn't hesitate. With one swift movement, Rex lunged at the man, knocking him to the ground. The gun slipped from the man's hand, and the other officers rushed in to make the arrest. Jake was right behind Rex. His heart was pounding in his chest, but the adrenaline was a sharp focus that pushed all fear aside. The suspect on the ground was quickly handcuffed, and the rest of the officers moved in to clear the building. Rex, though tired, stayed by Jake's side, eyes scanning the room for any more danger. But the danger had passed. The bank was safe. The suspects were in custody. And once again, Rex had saved the day. Jake knelt down and patted Rex's head. "You did it, partner. We did it." Rex looked up at him, tail wagging. It was a look Jake would never forget. They had made it through another mission, together. And Jake realized that, no matter how much time they had left, he would cherish every moment with his best friend. The next morning, Jake woke up early, feeling the weight of the night's events. He sat on the edge of his bed, looking over at Rex, who was curled up on his dog bed by the door. Rex had fallen asleep right after their mission, his body exhausted from the night's work. Even though Rex had been through so much, he never once hesitated. He always gave everything he had for Jake and the city. Jake stood up and stretched. He was tired too, but his mind was still racing. The bank robbery was over, and everyone was safe, but there was something that nagged at him. He knew that Rex's retirement was just around the corner, but after last night's mission, Jake wasn't sure he was ready to let go of his partner. "Morning, buddy," Jake said softly as he walked over to Rex. The dog lifted his head and gave a sleepy wag of his tail. Jake bent down and scratched Rex's ears. "I'm proud of you, partner," he said quietly. "You've always been my hero." Rex nuzzled Jake's hand, his eyes filled with trust and love. Jake couldn't help but smile. He had always known that Rex wasn't just a dog, he was family. But as Jake made breakfast and went about his morning routine, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Rex wasn't acting quite like himself. He was slower than usual, his steps a little more hesitant. Jake brushed it off at first, thinking it was just the after-effects of the night's excitement. But later, as they prepared for another shift, Jake began to notice that Rex wasn't as energetic. The dog's movements were slower, and he seemed to be breathing a little heavier than normal. Jake's heart tightened. He knew Rex was getting older, but this wasn't just the usual signs of aging. Something didn't feel right. "Hey Rex, you okay?" Jake asked, kneeling down in front of him. Rex looked up at him, tail still wagging, but there was a tiredness in his eyes that Jake hadn't seen before. The old dog let out a small sigh, as if to say he was fine. But Jake wasn't convinced. He wasn't sure if Rex was just tired or if something more serious was going on. Jake decided to take Rex to the vet to make sure everything was all right. They arrived at the clinic, and the vet, Dr. Carter, immediately noticed that Rex seemed a little off. He listened to Rex's heartbeat and took a blood sample to run some tests. "I'm not sure what's going on yet," Dr. Carter said, looking concerned. "But I think we should keep him here for a little while for observation." Jake's heart sank. Rex had been through so much, but Jake had never seen him like this before. He sat in the waiting room, his hands clenched together. He couldn't imagine life without his partner. Rex had been there for him through thick and thin. He was more than just a dog. He was his best friend. After a few hours, Dr. Carter came out with the results. "Jake, I'm afraid it's not good news. Rex has suffered some internal injuries from his years of work. His heart is weak, and his body is showing signs of exhaustion. He's a fighter, but his time may be running out." Jake's mind went blank. He didn't want to hear this. He didn't want to face the reality that his best friend, his loyal partner, might not be with him much longer. "Is there anything we can do?" Jake asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Carter shook her head. "At this point, we can only make sure he's comfortable. We can keep him here and monitor him, but his condition is serious. I'm sorry, Jake." Jake's eyes filled with tears. He had never imagined this moment would come. He had always thought Rex would be by his side, running missions, protecting people, for years to come. But now, the reality of it all was sinking in. Rex was still lying on the examination table, looking up at Jake with those loving eyes. He had no idea what was happening, but Jake knew. The dog had given everything for him. He had protected him, served him, and now it was time for him to rest. "I'll be right here, buddy," Jake whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "I'm not going anywhere." Rex nuzzled Jake's hand again, and for a moment, everything felt like it was going to be okay. But deep down, Jake knew it wasn't. Rex's time had come. The next few days were the hardest Jake had ever faced. Rex wasn't the same dog he had been before. His energy was low, and he seemed to struggle with simple movements. The once strong, fast K9 was now slower, more tired. Jake spent every moment by his side, not wanting to leave his partner alone for even a second. Jake continued to take Rex to the vet for regular checkups. Dr. Carter did everything she could to make Rex as comfortable as possible. But no matter how much care they gave him, the signs of wear and tear were there. Rex's heart was weakening, and his body was showing more signs of stress. It was heartbreaking for Jake to watch, but he knew what had to be done. Jake wasn't ready to let go, but he couldn't let Rex suffer. He sat beside Rex every night, petting him and talking to him, trying to remind him how much he was loved. Sometimes, Rex would look up at him with those big brown eyes, as if understanding the sadness Jake felt. Other times, he would rest his head on Jake's lap, exhausted from the weight of the world on his old body. One evening, Jake took Rex outside to the backyard, where they had spent countless hours training, playing, and bonding. The sun was setting, casting an orange glow across the sky. Rex stood still for a moment, looking at the open space in front of him. His tail wagged softly, but it wasn't the same strong wag that Jake had seen before. "Remember when we first started out, buddy?" Jake said, his voice trembling. "You were just a pup, full of energy and eager to learn. We had so many adventures, didn't we?" Rex lifted his head, as if recalling those memories. He barked once, his voice weaker than it had been, but still filled with a sense of pride. Jake knelt down beside him and wrapped his arms around Rex's neck, holding him close. "You've always been there for me. You've been my partner, my protector, and my best friend. I don't know what I'm going to do without you." Rex nuzzled Jake's hand gently, his eyes soft with affection. But Jake could see the exhaustion in his eyes, and it broke his heart. That night, as they lay together on the couch, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that their time was running out. He stayed awake, watching over Rex, knowing that each moment they had left together was precious. He didn't want to think about what would come next, but he knew he had to prepare himself. Rex had given everything to protect him, and now it was time for Jake to return that love and care. The next morning, Jake took Rex back to Dr. Carter's office. It was clear that Rex was weaker. His legs trembled slightly as he walked, and his breathing was slow and shallow. Jake held onto him tightly, trying to offer him comfort as they made their way inside. "Jake," Dr. Carter said softly as she approached, "it's time we talk about what's best for Rex. His condition isn't getting better. He's in pain, and he's very tired." Jake's heart sank. He had known this moment would come, but hearing the words out loud made it so much harder. "What should I do?" Jake asked, his voice thick with emotion. Dr. Carter took a deep breath. "We can give Rex some more medication to help ease his pain, but it's not a permanent solution. His heart and body are too worn out. He's been a hero, but his time is almost up." Jake looked down at Rex, who was lying quietly on the floor beside him. The dog's head rested on his paws, and his eyes were soft and tired. Jake could see that Rex was ready to rest, but it didn't make it any easier for Jake to let go. "I don't want to lose him," Jake said, his voice breaking. "He's been with me through everything. How can I let him go?" Dr. Carter knelt beside Jake, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Sometimes the hardest thing to do is to let them go when they've given everything. But Rex has had a full life. He's been a hero, and he's been loved. That's all we can ask for." Jake nodded, wiping away a tear. He couldn't bear to think of a life without Rex, but he knew that letting him go was the right thing to do. He had given everything to keep Jake safe, and now it was time for Jake to return that love by letting him rest. The decision had been made, but that didn't make it any easier. Jake sat next to Rex, his loyal companion, in the quiet room at Dr. Carter's clinic. Rex lay on the soft blanket, his head resting on Jake's lap. His breathing was slow and steady, but Jake could feel the weight of the moment. He reached down and gently stroked Rex's fur. The dog lifted his head slightly, his tired eyes meeting Jake's. There was a deep understanding in those eyes, as if Rex knew that their time together was coming to an end. "Rex," Jake whispered, his voice thick with emotion, "I don't know how I'm going to do this without you. You've been my best friend for so long. You've saved me, protected me, and loved me. I owe you everything." Rex gave a small wag of his tail, as if to reassure Jake that it was okay. His body may have been weak, but the bond they shared was as strong as ever. Dr. Carter entered the room quietly, her face kind but sad. "Jake, if you're ready, we can begin. But take all the time you need." Jake looked at her, his heart heavy. "I'm ready," he said, though his voice broke at the words. It wasn't true. He wasn't ready, but he knew it was the only choice he had left for Rex. The dog had given everything for him, and now it was time to let him rest. Dr. Carter gently placed a syringe in Rex's leg. Rex barely reacted, his eyes never leaving Jake's face. The moment was so peaceful, so calm, as if the dog knew that he was not alone. Jake sat there, holding Rex's head in his hands, whispering words of love and gratitude. "You've been the best partner anyone could ask for," Jake said. "I'll never forget you, Rex. You'll always be in my heart." Rex's tail gave a final soft wag, and for a moment, everything seemed still. Jake felt the warmth of Rex's body, the softness of his fur, and in that moment, he realized that the dog had given him so much more than just protection. Rex had given him friendship, loyalty, and a love that was unconditional. Jake felt the weight of the loss as Rex's breathing slowed. His beloved partner was at peace now. It was the hardest thing he had ever done, but he knew Rex was finally free from pain. Dr. Carter gave Jake a moment alone with Rex before gently stepping out of the room. Jake stayed there, sitting with Rex, quietly grieving, but also feeling a sense of gratitude. He knew that Rex had lived a full life. He had served with honor and had been loved beyond measure. As the sun began to set, casting a soft glow through the clinic window, Jake stood up and gently lifted Rex's head, one last time. "Goodbye, buddy. You'll never be forgotten. I'll carry you with me always." Jake kissed the top of Rex's head, his tears falling freely now. It was hard to let go, but he knew that Rex was now free from pain and running through fields, chasing after his favorite ball once again, in a place where he would always be young and strong. Jake stepped outside into the cool evening air, the weight of his loss heavy on his shoulders. But even as he felt the emptiness in his heart, he knew Rex's legacy would live on. The dog had touched so many lives, including Jake's, and his story would be remembered for years to come. Jake looked up at the sky, wiping his eyes. "I love you, Rex," he whispered to the wind. "Thank you for everything." The days following Rex's passing felt like they were moving in slow motion for Jake. The house seemed empty without the sound of Rex's paws on the floor, without the gentle snoring in the corner of the room. It felt like a piece of him was missing, and no matter how much he tried to keep himself busy, the quiet was overwhelming. Jake spent hours going through old photos of Rex. There were so many memories, so many adventures. He found pictures of the first day they met, when Rex was just a puppy, full of energy and excitement. He remembered how scared he had been, not knowing how to handle such an eager dog. But Rex had quickly proven himself to be more than capable. They had formed an unbreakable bond from that very first day. Jake also found photos from Rex's early days in the K9 unit. There was one of them, standing proud beside each other after their first successful mission. It had been a difficult case, but Rex had tracked down the suspect with ease. The photo captured the trust they had in each other, a bond that had only grown stronger over the years. But as Jake flipped through the photos, a small smile appeared on his face. Despite the sadness, he could see how much Rex had given. The memories were filled with moments of bravery, loyalty, and love. Rex had never asked for anything in return, except for the love and care Jake had always given him. And that was enough. As time went on, Jake found comfort in the idea that Rex's legacy would live on in the people they had helped. Rex had been more than just a dog. He had been a protector, a hero, and a friend to everyone who needed him. Jake knew that there were countless people out there who had been touched by Rex's work, even if they never realized it. One day, Jake received a call from Captain Harris at the police station. "Jake, I got something I think you'll want to see." Jake's heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" "You'll see when you get here. It's about Rex." Jake didn't hesitate. He knew that whatever it was, it had to be something important. He drove to the station, his thoughts racing. What could Captain Harris want to show him? Was it something to do with Rex's work? When Jake arrived, Captain Harris was waiting for him. "Come on in," he said, motioning toward his office. "I've got something I think you'll want to hear." Captain Harris sat behind his desk, looking at a stack of papers. He looked up and smiled warmly at Jake. "You know, Rex was one of the best officers we've ever had. We'll never forget what he did for this department." Jake nodded, his throat tight. "I'll never forget either. He was more than a partner. He was family." Captain Harris handed Jake a framed certificate. It was an official commendation from the department, recognizing Rex's outstanding service and dedication. There was a small plaque beneath it, reading, "In honor of K9 Rex, a true hero." Tears filled Jake's eyes as he looked at the certificate. "I didn't expect this," he whispered. Captain Harris smiled softly. "Rex may have retired, but his legacy lives on. We've decided to honor him in a special way. We're naming the K9 training facility after him." Jake's heart swelled with pride. He had never imagined that Rex would be remembered in such a way, but he couldn't think of a better tribute. Rex had given so much to the department, and now his name would be forever tied to the next generation of K9 officers. That's incredible," Jake said, his voice choked with emotion. "He deserves it. He was a hero." Captain Harris nodded. "We all think so. And we wanted you to be the one to unveil the plaque." Jake couldn't speak for a moment. The idea of honoring Rex in such a meaningful way filled him with gratitude. It was a perfect way to keep Rex's memory alive, to ensure that his work and his spirit would continue to inspire others. Jake left the station later that day, the certificate carefully tucked under his arm. He couldn't wait to tell the world about the incredible dog who had given everything for those he loved. He would share Rex's story, and through that, Rex's legacy would live on forever. As Jake drove home, he looked up at the sky and whispered, "You did it, Rex. You'll never be forgotten." The ceremony at the K9 training facility was everything Jake had hoped for and more. The day was sunny and bright, and the air was filled with a sense of respect and honor for Rex. Officers, friends, and family gathered to pay tribute to the dog who had given so much. Jake stood at the front of the crowd, his heart full of pride as he looked around. The plaque, engraved with Rex's name, was mounted on the wall of the training facility. It read, "In memory of K9 Rex, a loyal companion and hero. His courage and dedication will never be forgotten." Jake felt a mix of emotions as he stood there, surrounded by people who had worked with Rex. He could see the respect in their eyes, the way they spoke about his partner with such admiration. Rex had left a mark on everyone he met, and today that legacy was being honored in the most beautiful way possible. As the ceremony began, Captain Harris stepped forward to say a few words. "Today, we gather not just to remember a great dog, but to celebrate his life and the impact he had on this department," Captain Harris said, his voice steady and full of emotion. Rex was more than just a K9 officer. He was a friend, a protector, and a true hero. He served this department with pride, and his legacy will inspire future officers and K9s for years to come. Jake stood silently, listening to the words that seemed to capture everything he had felt during his time with Rex. He was proud, but also humbled by the recognition. Rex had been so much more than just a dog. He had been a partner, a team member, and a constant source of comfort and strength. After the ceremony, Jake walked over to the plaque, his fingers brushing over the engraved letters. "You did it, Rex," he whispered softly. "You're a legend now." The tears came again, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of gratitude. Rex's memory would live on in every officer who walked through the doors of that training facility, in every K9 who trained to protect and serve just as Rex had done. As Jake stood there, lost in thought, he felt a gentle tap on his shoulder. He turned around to find a young officer standing behind him, holding a small, excited-looking puppy in her arms. "This is Luna," the officer said with a smile. "She's our newest recruit. We just started her training." Jake smiled back, wiping away his tears. "She's a beautiful dog. I'm sure she'll do great things." Luna wiggled in the officer's arms, her big bright eyes full of energy. She was small and fluffy, and her tail wagged rapidly as she looked up at Jake. For a moment, it almost felt like Rex was right there beside him, reminding him that life went on, that the work of protecting and serving would continue. Jake bent down to meet the puppy's eyes. "I have no doubt you'll make us proud, Luna," he said, his voice warm. "Rex would have been so proud of you." As the ceremony continued, Jake spent time talking to the other officers, sharing stories of Rex's time in the field and how much he had meant to everyone. They laughed and cried together, remembering all the moments that made Rex such a special dog. Even though Rex was gone, his spirit was alive in every conversation, in every story shared. Later that evening, Jake stood by the training facility, watching the sunset. The colors in the sky were beautiful, and for the first time in a long while, Jake felt a sense of peace. He had said goodbye to Rex, but Rex's legacy would continue to shape the department, the officers, and the canines who came after him. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the horizon, Jake whispered one final goodbye to his partner. "You did your job, Rex. You were the best. And now it's time for others to carry on your work, but you'll never be forgotten. Not by me, not by anyone who knew you." With a deep breath, Jake turned and walked back toward his car, feeling lighter than he had in days. The future was uncertain, but one thing was for sure. Rex's legacy would live on forever. And in a way, Rex was still with him, guiding him, inspiring him, and reminding him that even in the hardest times, there was always hope. It had been months since Rex's passing, but Jake still felt the ache in his heart every day. There wasn't a moment that went by without remembering his loyal friend, his brave partner, and the hero who had saved his life more times than he could count. But through the pain, Jake had found peace in knowing that Rex had lived a full life, one filled with purpose, love, and a legacy that would never fade. One morning, as Jake was drinking his coffee and looking out at the quiet street from his porch, he noticed something moving in the yard. It was Luna, the young canine he had met at the ceremony. She had grown since then, now a strong, confident dog, already showing promise as a future police officer. Jake smiled as he watched her play, running back and forth in the grass, her energy almost endless. Luna had become an important part of the department, and Jake was proud to see her following in Rex's footsteps. He knew that she wouldn't replace Rex. No one could, but there was something comforting about knowing that the work they had done together would continue through another dog. As Jake watched Luna, he thought about the day when he would retire. He had spent so many years working alongside Rex and had always thought of himself as a protector of the community. But now, with Luna, Jake knew that the next generation of canines would carry on the same mission. They would continue to protect, serve, and create a safer world for everyone. That afternoon, Jake decided to visit the canine training facility, where Rex's plaque had been placed. It had been a while since he had been there, and he wanted to pay his respects once again. The facility was busy as usual, with dogs in training and officers going through drills. But there, near the entrance, the plaque still shone brightly, a reminder of everything Rex had done. Jake stood there for a long time, looking at the plaque and remembering the moments he had shared with his partner. He thought about the first time they had worked together, how Rex had quickly learned to trust him, and how that trust had grown into something unbreakable over the years. Jake had never known a love so pure, so unconditional, as the love he had shared with Rex. As he stood there, lost in thought, a young officer walked up to him. "Hey, Jake," the officer said with a smile. "I just wanted to say that we've been working with Luna a lot. She's doing great. We're all excited to see her follow in Rex's paw prints." Jake turned and smiled. "I'm proud of her. Rex would have been too. She's got a lot of potential." The officer nodded. "She's already making a difference, and we all remember what Rex did for us. He set the bar high, and we're all doing our best to live up to his legacy." Jake felt a sense of pride well up inside him. Rex's impact on the department was far-reaching, and now Luna was carrying that torch. Jake knew that Rex's memory would continue to inspire officers and canines for years to come. Later that evening, Jake returned home and sat on his porch once more, watching the sunset. The sky was painted with brilliant colors, and he felt a deep sense of calm wash over him. He had lost his best friend, but he had gained so much in return. He had gained a community that valued the work Rex had done, and a new generation of canines who would carry on that work. Jake looked up at the same sky he had looked at with Rex by his side all those years. "Thank you, Rex," he whispered, "for everything. You'll never be forgotten. I'll carry you with me always." In the years to come, Jake would visit the K9 training facility whenever he could, always taking a moment to stand in front of Rex's plaque. It was his way of honoring his partner, his hero. And as Luna continued to grow and succeed, Jake knew that Rex's spirit would live on in every dog who followed in his footsteps. Rex had given everything, and now it was up to Jake and the others to ensure that his legacy would never fade. As the years passed, Jake's heart healed. The pain of losing Rex would never completely go away, but it softened with time. And through it all, he carried with him the love, the memories, and the inspiration that Rex had left behind. Rex was gone, but his impact, his legacy, would last forever.